Hello, everyone. Welcome to Real Estate Right Now, where we talk about real estate matters that matter to you. My name is Jay Izzo, and we are live here from the Linda Craft Team Studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina, part of the Greater Research Triangle Park. Today's show, will my house appraise? Question that people have, and they also want to know, well, what goes into an appraisal? What do these appraisers do? How do they go about doing their business? What kind of rules and regulations are they under that creates their statute, basically, of how they have to go about doing an appraisal? And I, of course, wanted to do this show for a long, long time, and I've been, for the last few years. And so finally, I am at a conference called the North Carolina Real Estate Educators Association Conference, and a guy that I've known. Actually, Linda and I have known for decades, I would say, in the business. His name is Vic Knight. He is 42 years in the business of appraiser. He's also a broker, real estate broker, and he was served on the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. And I wanted him to come in because he did this fascinating talk on what appraisers have to deal with. And I know you as a consumer kind of wonder what all goes into this appraisal process. I think we kind of think that, what they do is they kind of just walk around the house, and then what they do is then they find some other comps, and then they put it together, and that's it, it's done. And then, it's just this real fairly simple process. It's not. It's actually a fairly complicated process. Actually, it's a really complicated process. Not fairly, it's a really complicated process. So I invited him in. So Vic Knight, thanks for coming in to the show. Is there anything I should add about you beyond what I touched?
That's way too plenty. We'll figure that. Thank you, Jay.
You're welcome. Thank you. Houses have to get appraisals. There's a number. I know there's no appraisal. You're a general appraiser, which means
certified
general appraiser. And I think what that means is you don't just do residential, right? You do commercial as well, right? So I know that most of our listeners are residential people, and they have the question of what goes into an appraisal. And you have a lot of rules that you have to follow.
Correct.
Because we have these two entities called Sallie Mae and Freddie Mac that seem to set up the guidelines of what they need from you, right? So let's just start generally, and we'll start funneling down. Talk to us or talk to them about how the appraisal process actually works. How does it start? When do you get called in and somebody calls you and who calls you and says, hey, Vic, we need you to do an appraisal on this house? Where does that start?
Pretty good beginning. We'll maybe talk a little bit about some of the challenges that appraisers have that may or may not be related to the rules and regulations, regulatory side of this. But from an appraisal standpoint, typically in a residential world, not necessarily in the commercial world, the client that I work for is the lender, the bank. And so the bank contacts me with an address, maybe some contact information. Please go do this appraisal. They typically, in the engagement letter, will identify some subtle wants and needs that the appraisal report needs to include. But mostly it's around the standard residential appraisal report format. That appraisal report format originally is designed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They're the two gorillas, and I say that quite literally, in the lending world. And from a consuming public standpoint, this isn't like calling the local bank or maybe even the credit union or savings and loan or other things, because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are not direct lenders. They're the gorillas in the secondary market. So the local lender originates the loan, package it all up, get it all closed, settled and everything else. And then they sell the loan just like they would sell any other product. But they're selling the loan to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. There are other secondary market players. You mentioned Ginnie Mae and Ginnie Mac, and there's a whole bunch of mac and cheese secondary market people out there, a whole bunch of them. But that's who you work for. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are, like I said, they're the gorillas. They buy approximately 70% of all the paper, all the secondary market paper that's originated by all the lenders across the country. So that's why they're so big. Well, I make that big point because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac actually design the report form. Consuming public may have seen a standard form. I didn't bring one with me. It's not important. But it's designed by them. Essentially right across the very top, it says it's for lending purposes only. So I can't use it if you called me personally and said, Vic, would you come appraise my house? I can't use that form. I have to use a different form because it's controlled by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. There's certain things that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac ask for on this form. One example would be, I'm supposed to analyze the contract. So a lot of brokers ask all the time, why the heck do you need a copy of the contract? You just need that so you know what number to hit. That's the target number. It has nothing to do with what Vic wants. It has everything to do with what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac want because it's their form. And the lender who originated the loan has told me in the assignment, please use a 1004 form. Please use the standard URAR, whatever that case may be. They're all the same thing. So they're the one that I'm working for. They're my client. In same fashion that a broker is working for the buyer or the broker's working for the seller. They have a client. They have fiduciary duties. So do appraisers. They have a duty, have a responsibility to that lender based on what those criteria were in the assignment. That's a long dissertation to say just that's who I work for. So I want to make sure that everybody's clear about that process. So the more complicated thing, to beat that up just a little bit, is to understand that the client has said to me, Vic, do the following things, but I have to meet also other regulatory issues within the report. Those issues are typically dictated by what's known in the appraisal world as USPAP, Uniform Standards Professional Appraisal Practice. That is written by the Appraisal Foundation. I served on the Appraisal Foundation's Board of Trustees for a number of years. And they were authorized by Congress to develop the appraisal standards. So that's what we're going to spend our time talking about. They also were authorized by Congress to identify the appraisal requirements so Vic can get a license, so Vic can qualify the license, questions, answers, score, and all that kind of stuff. We'll not spend any time on that thing, but that's where the number of hours and time and regulatory things I have to do to be able to qualify to get a license. And it's numerous hours. It's in the hundreds and hundreds of hours, just like going to college. It's that kind of
it's
intense.
a college course.
Yeah. So anyhow, in the residential world, this USPAP concept has all kinds of things in it. It's literally books about 1.25 inches thick, so it's not small. There are, depending on what the assignment is, so for house A, you're going to have a pretty standard sort of things. House B probably have the same standards. But when you have below grade space, when you have extra buildings, maybe people have mom and dad in-law suites.
That's not attached.
Just other things that can come into play. But anyhow, that's the document I have to follow. One of the things in USPAP, that isn't in USPAP, but is now become a requirement that the lenders are saying is not only do I have to follow USPAP, the book, but I also have to follow other things in developing the report. So it's a good term to use is Vic as an appraiser develops a report. I just don't write one. So I go through a process, as you mentioned, can be more complicated. In some cases, I'm using section 1 in this USPAP document. In some cases, I'm using section 3. In some cases, section 7 kind of stuff. So you got to figure that out.
Right.
But one of those other requirements that is coming from the lenders, which really comes from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, is in the residential world primarily, is they want Vic to make sure that some of the information I put together, the data that's being generated in the written report, follows some other guidelines. Those other guidelines are typically about identifying the property mostly in the size of the home, living area, gross living area, above grade, below grade, other things. So that's another requirement, but that's all set in this original document that the lender said, Vic, go do the appraisal at 123 North Main Street. Oh, by the way, please follow the following things. So that sets it up for now. You've got to go to the home. Typically, depends on how complicated the home is, meaning it's got a lot of angles, have unusual high ceilings, vaulted ceilings, tray ceilings, coffered ceilings, all kinds of things that can be included in that. Above grade, below grade space, garages, all those things. The appraiser has to identify that. So they're going to spend probably pretty close to about an hour or so, 45 minutes to an hour, probably at a minimum, inspecting the house. And when I say inspecting, I'm talking about inspecting it from an appraiser's standpoint, not from a home inspector, not from a structural standpoint. But as I'm inspecting, I'm expected, quite frankly, by this lender, please identify those things that might have some deficiencies in them. Please look at the roof. Please look at the below grade space. Please look at the foundation. Is there any moisture or water in the crawl space? Is it on a slab? Does it have crawl space?
Does it have a basement?
Does it have a basement? All those sort of things. So I've got to take that information as I'm walking around, probably taking notes, probably measuring and taking photographs inside and outside. So I make that point because one of the things that I did while I was serving on the Appraisal Foundation, that entity that is this other regulatory body, is I co-authored a document that's intended literally for the consumer, for buyers and sellers, to be able to read, to understand what to expect during an appraisal inspection. So when Vic shows up at the house, if someone had read that, maybe the listing broker might have provided it to him. Maybe if it's from the selling side, the buyer side, they might have provided that to him. It's a document that we wrote to help the consumer generally understand what to expect. So
what's the name of that document?
It's the residential, for the brokerage world, it's the residential booklet about expectations in a residential appraisal inspection.
Where can they find that if a consumer wanted to find that?
So a digital version, I have it on my website, but the National Association publishes it on their websites, where they, as a part of this agreement with the Appraisal Foundation, is let's get it out there, let's disseminate this. And the National Association agreed to be part of that to do it. They can get it directly from the Appraisal Foundation, just theappraisalfoundation.org, and they can look it up there. I'm trying to remember whether it's on the North Carolina Association of Realtors website or not. I think it is, but I don't know that 100%.
What's your website? That if they get, you got it on your website, what's your website? So they can just pull it down from there.
Startschoolnc.com.
Startschoolnc.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll go back and make sure it's there. They can find it. Sort of thing. But there's places that can, people can find it and it can be disseminated from.
So it's a public document that anybody can download digitally, that they can get, and they can get an understanding of what you do.
But before
you get there, I want to address something though. You had mentioned when we were at the conference together and you were speaking, and by the way, great speaker, by the way, he's absolutely fabulous. So if you want to hire him because he's really that good. When the lender says, hey, Vic, I want you to do an appraisal, how much time do you get to make this happen? Because
good point.
Because I think people want to believe, especially if they're selling their home, right? I think they want to believe, oh, they're going to give me plenty of lead time before the appraiser shows up to appraise the house. But you made a point, that's not always the case. So maybe help us understand that process.
Well, two avenues can happen, two different properties. But what happens more often than not and I'll say 60% of the time, maybe 65, is I'm given what I'll call a reasonable lead time. I got one yesterday as an example. Let me start by saying I don't talk to anybody. The world goes back many years during the Great Recession. So 15 years ago, people got very nervous about appraisers and the brokerage world, not putting anybody's head in the vice, but lenders and attorneys and all kinds of things weren't necessarily operating in the best of light. So there were the bad actors, very small number of them, but the one bad apple spoils the bunch.
Right, that's right.
And it caused a whole bunch of things called requirement to be independent. So appraisers have to be independent, impartial, and objective. That's literally a phrase in part of that USPAP thing. And there's a lot of pressure on us to do that. And because of that, I get my assignments from a residential standpoint through a portal. So I get an email. Vic, go appraise 123 North Main Street. I don't talk to anybody. I can't talk to anybody. They don't give me a telephone number. They don't give me other contacts. So all my information comes through the portal and goes back through the portal. I make that point. I'll come back to it in a minute. So the challenge is the majority of times I get enough lead time, but the lead time starts the moment that I get the assignment. I'm supposed to, within 24 hours, make contact with that seller of that property, that owner of that property. So whether it's being bought or sold, I still need to get into that property. That sometimes takes a while. And then once I've inspected the property, then get another, I'll call reasonable period of time, usually about 48 hours. So this is now in the process somewhere close to about 3 days to get that turned around. Now, depending on how complex it is, houses with lots and lots, the mega mansions and, great expanses of site size, 10 acres and others,
Right.
it can take a little longer than that. Maybe this computer-driven system understands that. Maybe they don't. So in this portal, I've got to have that communication with somebody to identify how long it's going to take. It's usually probably somewhere between 3 and maybe as much as 5 days to get it turned around. That's the majority time. But there's another part of the time, that's about this 35 to 40%, that I get an appraisal request yesterday. So as this example, oh, by the way, can you get this report back? We need it back by Friday. Now, just to be clear, I got the appraisal request through an email at about actually, if I remember it correctly, 4:38 p.m. yesterday afternoon. So now I got to do everything I need to do and get it back to them by the end of the day, Friday. Well, I call those, my wife actually says, those are the emergency appraisals.
Right.
So sometimes that period of time is really short, and that's been a really long story to say my biggest challenge, regardless of whether it's the 4 or 5 day period or this really short, like 24-hour to 48-hour period, my biggest challenge, regardless of those two circumstances, is actually getting into the property. Because in some cases, and now just to make a point, sometimes brokers don't necessarily explain the entire process of, yes, I'm going to list my house. We're going to put the sign in the front yard and the clock's going to start ticking. And now the seller says, why hadn't it shown it? Why not shown it? It's been 3 days. We don't have a contract yet. Well, all that's true, but that's just the beginning of the process. And brokers sometimes need to explain that a little better. In teaching pre-licensing classes, which I do, I tell my pre-licensed students who know very little, if anything, about the real estate business, is both the buying side and the selling side, often two different brokers, probably even in two different firms.
Yep.
Both of them have exactly the same work requirement. They have the same job, exactly the same job, no different on one side than it is the other. And their job totally is to get their client to the settlement table.
Right.
That's their job. Now, do they have to do a whole lot of stuff to get there? Yes, they do. But is it going to be a long period of time, short period of time? Well, one of those jobs is to explain to this seller oh, by the way, there's some strange guy named Vic, maybe they know him, is going to have to show up, knock on your door. I'm here to appraise your house. They need to tell them that, because I get circumstances is like, well, I need to get into the house and do my appraisal inspection. Oh, well, we're leaving this afternoon. We're going on vacation. We won't be back for another week because my broker told me this is going to take about 30, 45 days to close. See, they think it's just, we got it under contract. All the magic happens somewhere out there. Well, that's true. But part of that magic is I'm going to have to do an appraisal on the house. Brokers need to explain to that seller, by the way, there's a guy that's going to knock on your door.
Right.
Somebody needs to let him in and not push him off, for a few hours or a few days or whatever else. And I'm not trying to make that sound like it's got to be immediacy.
Right.
It's just got to be told so people can pre-plan your life, my life,
right.
Our respective wives and daughters and everybody else. They're planners. We all plan to some degree, and we just need to, if we know in advance, we can all plan. We can make all that fit in. That's my biggest challenge in doing appraisal work, is actually getting in the house.
So this is an education thing for both the real estate broker and also if you're a seller of the house, is to say, hey, listen, we would love to be able to tell you when the appraiser is going to come, but we don't know, because that's going to be done from the lender side. And we'd love to tell you that we're going to know exactly what that day is. And in most cases, we can give you a little lead time, but there is 1/3 of the time, there's going to be an occasion where it's going to be a last minute deal. This appraiser, you need to get into the house, and you are going to need to do what you do now. And so please don't prohibit that, because you're delaying what you want, and that is the house to close.
Got to get to the table.
We got to get to the table. And so if you want this to get to the table, it would behoove you to just say, yeah, I know my house is in perfect shape, right? Because I can hear people go, well, I haven't even cleaned the house.
I don't care. That's not what I'm there for. I'm not there for that.
And I just want to assure everybody, he's not judging you, by the way, of the cleanliness of your house. That's not what he's doing here.
Not at all.
So then you get into the house. I think people want to know a little bit about that process of what you're looking at, because I love the fact that, you've got to be objective. You have to be completely objective in this, because can I tell you, the paper doesn't care about anything else. They just care about the numbers and, and so you mentioned a couple things here. One is that you're going to take measurements and what's going to be measured, but then you entered in pictures.
Correct.
And people are going to probably say, and I'm stealing your thunder here a little bit, but but people are going to say, what do you mean he's going to take pictures? Well, what's he going to do with those pictures?
Exactly.
So kind of walk us through this process when you're appraising.
Real world example. Last week, I was down in northern Chatham County, a well-established neighborhood, and the sellers of this property built this custom home. They haven't bought and sold real estate, and I think back to this, probably 15, 16, 17 years. So they kind of either don't remember or didn't participate in that process early on. So I called them up, had a little bit of problem arranging this time to get in there. Did have to explain to them I'm on a short timeline. We finally got it all worked out. We get there, and part of this conversation in advance, and I always do this, mostly for the ladies, quite frankly. They're usually a little more particular about how their house appears. And I said, I'm going to be taking pictures both outside the house, front, back, sides, rear, front yard, backyard, street scenes, other kinds of things. But I'm also going to be taking pictures inside. And almost every time, because what are you taking pictures inside for? It's like, well, so I have to stop and explain this. As the lender requires me to take pictures outside, but inside. Those pictures on the inside are going to be for all the major living spaces. So like living rooms, like kitchens. It's going to be all the bathrooms. It's going to be all the other spaces. It might be some below grade space, might be attics and that kind of stuff. There may be some other specialty pictures that can be necessary. So immediately they go, well, what are you going to do with all those? You're going to put them on the internet somewhere? No, they go to the lender. So, what the lender does with them, and I'm not trying to defend lenders or support them, either one. They're only asking for these pictures because the old proverbial thing of pictures worth 1,000 words.
Right.
You got to think way back in time, Great Recession, and even back into the 80s when you had the savings and loan crisis, and people, this small group of people that spoiled a batch of apples, they were taking pictures of houses that actually were not the houses being appraised. Side notes, to give you an example, I occasionally do some work for the FBI.
Okay.
And they call me and they said, I need you to look at this. We think this is mortgage fraud. Can you do a little work to help us understand this better? Because my world's not their world. They're investigators. I'm an appraiser. So sometimes I get asked to go look at some of these properties. And more often than not, in those circumstances, that property doesn't exist, literally.
Wow.
So mortgage fraud's a real world. So fast forward that concept that the now lender and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac want to make sure that what they're making their decision about this loan on is actually there. So they want pictures, both inside and out. That's why that's that way. And all the pictures that I take, after, I'll probably take 50 pictures almost every house. I'm going to pick probably at least 12.5 of those to fit into the report. And I'm going to send those pictures to the lender. That lender, I'm going to sell this loan to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac going to put it in some vault somewhere, so to speak, probably digital vault. It's not going to go anywhere else. So that's what happens to the pictures. That's why I have to take the pictures. It's the picture's worth 1,000 words.
You had mentioned as part of what you do, of course, you got to take measurements, right? I mean, both externally and internally of the home, and you're going to be measuring rooms and size of rooms, those type of things for the most part. And what the footprint is, and you're probably going to have an idea of how much land it's on. All those things are probably all part of it. So this could take a lot of time depending on the size of the house, and also if there's a detached garage with a suite above it that maybe they're using for a rental, or maybe there's a separate mother-in-law suite, off that just could take.
ADUs, auxiliary dwelling units.
Auxiliary dwelling units. Thank you for correcting me on that. That's good. Auxiliary dwelling units. We'll call it ADUs. It's what we'll call them. But this can take some time. What is there a kind of you're doing this by yourself, right? I mean, there's not like a team of you coming. This is all you having to do these measurements. So what should a seller expect? I know that houses, but let's take a 3,000 square foot house. All right. And let's say it's fairly traditional. It's 2-story that we typically see in. What does that average time take? Let's say they're on a 1/3 of an acre. What would something like that average take?
As the rule of thumb, I tell most people it's going to take me about an hour.
Okay.
It might be an hour and 15 minutes, depending on how, like you said, how complex it is. But on average, an hour is probably about right.
Okay.
If I'm being efficient with my time. I will say one thing, and in relationship to anybody who's watching, is that I'm used to doing it, and helping me doesn't help. And I'm not trying to be rude or anything else, but everybody wants to talk.
Right.
Well, you're working, and I don't mind talking, but it does slow the process down. So 1 hour can turn into 2 hours really, really fast.
Okay.
So I say this humorously, intended this way, but the property that I went to look at last week in Chatham County, probably fits about that size definition. The lady and the gentleman were very, very pleasant. Not only want to give me a glass of water, do you want a sandwich, kind of things, park in the shade, whatever, but they wanted to talk. So my 1 hour inspection time turned into about 2.5 before I left, which is perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
But if I told them I'm going to be there an hour, most people expect that.
Right.
So they want to know, why is it taking you so much time?
Right.
I'm trying to be very cautious and polite. Stop interrupting me. I can get my job done faster. I mean, I love people and I really enjoy
I know you
talking,
do.
and I can tell stories all day long, but it does add to the time element.
One of the things that people are always confused by is, what do you mean that certain spaces are not treated the same or don't have the same value? People will say, look, I finished this basement out and I have parties down there. I mean, my man cave is down there. Man, did you see the 7 screens that I have down there and the couch? And that's a living space. What do you mean it's not the same? Or the person who's got the bonus room going, well, I measured the bonus room floor to floor. You didn't give me the same amount of space. What do you mean those curved walls don't count exactly? And by the way, I finished this attic, right? I finished this. It's complete. You walk in there, it's air conditioned. It's got, what do you mean that doesn't count exactly? Help people understand that not all space is created equal when it comes to an appraiser.
So I'm going to take your introduction to that, but I'm going to use an example.
Okay.
Real world example. Happened to be many, many years ago. Known subdivision in somewhat the western part of the Triangle area. Get a telephone call. In this case, I actually was talking to somebody, local savings and loan. Vic, we need you to go appraise 123 North Main Street, whatever it is. Okay, great. I know the neighborhood, been doing appraisal work there for years. I'm riding along. I know about where it is. I pull in the driveway and go, oh, okay. Pull up tape measures and other things, walk up the door. Hi, I'm Vic Knight. I'm going to do appraisal work. I'm going to be outside for about 15, 20 minutes and I need to come in for a minute. Well, before I went anywhere with that, the guy that met me at the front door said, well, cool. Just curious, would you like to see my man cave? I mean, literally. And I said, sure. So this house is designed in such a way that I'm standing on the front porch. I walk in at his request. We make a left-hand turn, walk about 3 steps. He opens this door and there's the man cave. The man cave was a converted garage, just so that you understand. So when I pulled up the driveway and I looked at it, I was like, So you can see, the garage door is not a garage door anymore. It's something different, but you can look at it. This was a garage.
Yeah, right.
This is a house, front-loading garage house. So you can imagine that in subdivisions. So we look at it and I asked him, I said, oh, this is really cool. Do you have permits for when you converted the space? Well, the attitude began to change just a little bit. And he said, what permits? I don't need no permits. We go down the path of, I can do this. My brother-in-law can do that. My next door neighbor can do something else. I don't need no permits. Well, it was a nice man cave. I'd take it in a second.
Right.
Big screen TVs, lounge chairs, pool table actually over there.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
and a little, that we call them wet bars. Refreshment area.
Yeah.
So I said, well, okay, I'm going to be outside for a little bit. And we began to talk a little more about, why do I need all this stuff? I'm just going to tell you, a short version of the rest of it is I backed out of the house. I mean that literally, because he's a pretty good sized guy. I'm not. I backed out of the house. He asked me to leave. I confirmed that. And I backed out of the driveway and went back, picked up the phone, called the lender, started explaining it, and it went from there. I ended up having to make 3 visits to the house for different purposes and all kinds of stuff. My point, trying to make your point, all spaces aren't created equal.
Right.
They might be some finished below grade space.
Right.
They might be finished attics. They could be an addition, all kinds of things at different time periods, different finishes. Did you get permits? You could take a permit out. Does that mean you got all the inspections done? Did you get the certificate of occupancy? There are steps in all those things that can make spaces different. But physically, whether you're going through that kind of revitalization of the home, additions and otherwise, still spaces aren't all the same. They're not created equally. A garage isn't created equally to the main part of the house. The second floors not always created equally. Bonus rooms and finished attics and all that kind of stuff. They're just not created equal. We have to identify all this. Now, to a point, in this new world that we're talking about, and maybe we'll get to this point, but the new appraisal form requirement, which is also coming from Fannie and Freddie, brand new form coming out, actually started coming out for limited portion actually last month, mandatory first few months of next year, is entirely data driven. When I mean data, again, I'm not talking to anybody. So the reports are being submitted electronically to the lender, and then they're going to sell it to Fannie and Freddie later on. But all of those points are being read by a computer. So now I'm inputting the information on the form in electronic process. So when it's submitted electronically and the computer can read it. Well, I stopped trying to outthink underwriters a long time ago, and I'm just not equipped to outthink the computer. So it's kind of you're taking your best guess as to the information they want. I mean, it's driven by this form. I got that. But how lender A views some portions of this property might be different, literally, than lender B, than lender C, than whether it's a savings loan, whether it's a credit union, whether it's a conventional mortgage lender, whether it's FHA, VA, USDA, all those are different lending types. They have all of their own requirements for what they're looking for in not only appraisal, but they're using this appraisal for collateral lending purposes. They want to make sure that not only am I independent, impartial, objective in developing this report, but is this property properly collateralized for the amount of money that that buyer wants to borrow against to now buy that property? I mean, that's the whole purpose of the appraisal.
So when you go into this, first of all, there's several things that just popped into my head. One is, all right, note to everybody out there, make sure that if you've done anything like convert your garage, or dare I say, people who've taken their patio and all of a sudden enclosed it with the, to make it their, what do they call it, a three season room or 4 season room. Permits are going to be important. And by the way, he's going to ask you the question. You're going to ask the question that was this permitted. Don't get defensive. The answer is either yes or no. And then if it's yes, then do you ask where those permits are? Or
well, if it is permitted, and it's a good process for the appraiser to ask that question to begin with, because he or she are probably only going to make one visit to this property. So if you don't mind, let me segue to a point.
Sure.
So let's go back to this hour inspection period as the typical inspection. I'm going to spend an hour at this property trying to absorb on paper, by pictures, ask questions, everything else, everything that I know about this property. And then I'm going to take it back and start developing my report. Well, my 1 hour of time is paled in comparison to the probably 8, 15, 25 hours of time you as a broker has spent in this neighborhood, inside this house, having conversations with that seller, on the other side, having conversations with the buyer, whoever that might be, showing them around this neighborhood, allowing the buyer to absorb everything about the neighborhood in this house to make them emotionally ready to buy this home. So I'm taking my 1 hour And I've got to, I won't say duplicate that, but I'm going to take all the information I can and I'm going to put it in a report. Well, I make that point because what is very helpful is not only explaining to buyers and sellers the process, but also letting the broker know, I don't care which side of the transaction you're on, that you can help me. And I understand this sounds selfish, but you can help me help develop this report. But you got to look at it in a long-term process, because if you help me develop this report, then I'm helping your side of the transaction, buying side or selling side, get to the settlement table. So many years ago, it was actually about 2007 or 8, I just don't remember the exact year. I was serving as the chairperson of the National Association of Realtors Appraisal Committee. It's called Appraisal Section at the time. And we had lots of conversations right as the whole Great Recession was happening. And NAR asked me to write an article about this process and how this could be assisted by brokers, buying and selling side. So I wrote this little article. I ended up calling it Developing an Appraisal Package. And now that concept is across the country. I'm only telling you that because brokers, in my opinion, and I tell my pre-licensing students, they should go ahead and embrace this concept of helping the appraiser in the process. Give them all the information. Give them a copy of the plat. Give them a copy of the deed. Give them references to all the improvements, repairs, and upgrades that the seller has done during their ownership period. What's new? You know, when did they replace the roof, water heaters, HVAC systems, paint, inside, outside? All of those sort of things would be an assistance to help that process out. And if you're in a subdivision where there's a homeowner association, just as a broker, you're still responsible to make sure you provide HOA information, not only who the association manager is, but you need to provide them a balance sheet. You need to provide them a copy of the budget, and probably even in some cases, copies of covenants, restrictions, local rules and regulations, like when they have pools and that kind of stuff. I mean, that's all what you're going to do anyhow. Well, why don't you just go ahead and put that in a package that is available for the appraiser to utilize? You know, when the house goes under contract, so you know shortly thereafter, somewhat shortly thereafter, the appraisers are going to knock on that door, do all those magical things that you're expecting them to do. Why don't you help them out by putting together a little appraisal package? So I just want to segue into that as an assistance, and I think that's beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, no, I completely and totally agree with you, because, you know, I think, and I'm just thinking about this from a broker standpoint and a broker in charge standpoint. I'm thinking about this going, well, it only makes sense that if we want our seller to have the best opportunity for their house to appraise, and I understand you're independent and you're objective, and I understand that, but also you have a limited amount of time that you're going into that house. Any information that my agent can provide that can give you insights into, like you said, the HOA. I mean, even if it's, hey, here's the HOA link to everybody, right? And the most up-to-date HOA and the covenants and those type of things. But also, man, if you already have, these are the things that have been done to the house since ownership, right? And here is a documentation of, you know, all the permitting and everything that has gone into that, who we used, et cetera, so forth. That only helps your seller. And that seems like it would be, from my perspective, would be the best thing that you can do as part of your fiduciary responsibility, actually, to your client.
All right.
Is what it says to me. How often do you actually see that?
It's improving. It's you know,
what a great answer. It's improving,
yeah.
which you're telling me is something different. Okay.
Well, you know, 15 years ago, it was unheard of.
Right.
I think the world, and I'm talking about the brokerage world, has been embracing this slowly. I'll also say that kind of in the concept, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this, NAR, and this goes back literally into the 1990s or so, when shortly after I got into business. So Linda and I been in business about the same period of time.
Yeah, right.
Me just a couple of years earlier, but that's okay. It's evolved,
Right.
and for those early practitioners, we used to have MLS books.
Yep.
And some of the books, showed all these listings for this week. And some of those listings had pictures and some of them didn't.
Yeah.
NAR did a study, started in the 1990s. They've done it a few times since. But they found out pretty quickly that as they tracked all these sales, those sales, now we're talking about in the book, those sales that had pictures in them, they sold faster than the sales that didn't have pictures in them in MLS. And they sold for less days on market, and they sold for a higher sell price to list price ratio. Well, that was just about pictures. Well, you got to think about the embracing of this. Also, those brokers that were then, even way back then, just putting pictures into their listings and marketing materials, they're the ones that are a lot busier. They're that 20% that do 80% of the business people.
Right.
Well, that's still true today. So my point about it's improving, that 20% of people, if they're really wanting to help their client in the seller's side get from signing the yard to the settlement table in the shortest period of time for the greatest amount of sell price to list price ratio, they're doing all this stuff. They're doing the appraisal packages and others. That doesn't mean everybody else is.
Right.
So it's an evolving process, and it is getting better. And more people are doing it. For me to tell you kind of what the percentage is, it's still probably a little less than 50%. It still can improve a lot. And that benefits the buyers and sellers. It really does.
You mentioned that you call it a UAD. I don't think people understand, the consumer doesn't understand that, but I think as you described it, is now a 55-page document or something like that.
My reports, even in the current form, because of all that, mostly because of all these addenda that the lenders are asking for, which means Fannie and Freddie are asking for, they're pretty close to being on regular par, somewhere between 50 and 55 pages long.
Okay.
They're probably going to stay that number of pages.
Right.
And just a whole bunch more data, this whole data set. So UAD stands for Uniform Appraisal Data Set.
Okay.
Data set is the really emphasis word, because they're going to be asking for even more data in the next few months than they ever have before.
Okay. And I think this is an important point that consumers and realtors and even some lenders who watch the show is really, really important, that they're going to be asking you for more information. You had said something that you basically, maybe I misheard it, so correct me if I misheard what you said, but you've got to fill out every piece of this form. There's no shortcutting it. This form has to be filled out. What is this new form that's coming out that you said they've kind of pieced out a little bit, but it's going to be required at the beginning of next year?
Yeah.
Sometime in the first quarter of next year.
Roughly about right.
What is so different about this new UAD, this data set, that's different from what was before as an appraiser?
I'll try to make this short. But there's really two driving forces. Well, the first driving force is it so the computer can read it faster with more stuff. That's the underlying part.
Okay.
But the new form, that's going to be mandatory in the residential appraisal world, is one form, but it's replacing 6 forms. So when you said you got to fill out every single space, well, that's kind of true, but not true.
Okay.
So this one form is, you're going to check one box. This is a single family residential detached home. What we typically call house, at least I grew up in, maybe you grew up in as well, just a house on a lot somewhere.
Yeah.
But it also is going to be a form used for condominiums, big building, whole bunch of condos in it. It's also going to be for townhomes, still big building, individual units in them. It's also going to be for other multifamily properties like duplexes and triplexes and quads and that kind of stuff. So it's going to be one form. You're going to check one box. What is this property called? Da, 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 da. And now you're going to fill out that portion of the form that relates to that particular property. So this, just to be clear, every single space in the report is not, I'm not going to fill it out, but I am going to have to fill out every single space required for that particular property.
Yeah. Okay. So is there a difference between what's coming down the road now versus what you did before in terms of this form? Or is it just that they've kind of meld all these forms together so that it simplifies it? Or is there something majorly different?
Well, this gets a little more technical.
That's okay. We can live with that a little bit.
Okay. So this is affectionately called the new dynamic URAR. URAR stands for Uniform Residential Appraisal Report. Dynamic is the key word because now it shows up on my computer screen. And as I fill it out, I'm not going back 12 pages and inserting a new piece of data, the zoning map or the plat or the deed or the covenants or something. As I'm filling the report out, I'm putting in this page. I go on to the next one, I'm putting into that page. So it reads from the beginning page to the end page with all of that, all those pieces of information that just flows from an easy read standpoint. It flows more dynamically than having to flip pages back and forth like the old reports were.
I got you.
That's really kind of what's happening. Shortest version I can say about it.
Well, that's great. I think it's perfect. I do have a question though that relates to this form, because the one thing that you said is that a computer is going to read it.
Way true.
And this has me a little concerned, just a little concerned. And so maybe you can help me address my concern. Because if a computer is going to read it, that means that I think I understand that they're trying to eliminate any human bias by having a computer read it. But is there a danger potentially that if a computer reads it, that it's not connecting emotionally with the value of the house?
I think that is true. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
So, but now I got to send you back in time a little bit.
Right.
So let's go back 20 years or so, and you could go back even further than that, but 20 years is a reasonable period of time. It used to be quite literally, this standard form was 4 pages. The standard form is not 4 pages anymore. It's like our contracts thing. They're not 2 pages anymore. They're 17.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so everybody wanted more stuff. Well, a long time ago, 20 years ago or so, I was taking the form, and some people literally were handwriting them. That's one thing. But even in that world, you could literally type these things out, probably in some form of a software product, even way back then. But now this form completed by me and submitted back to the lender had to be personally read by you, the underwriter.
Right.
I mean, read.
Right.
So, okay. What the heck does that mean? Hey, Fred, you got any idea what this means? I've never seen that nomenclature before. So it slowed the process down.
Right.
Now, it did make it more personal.
Right.
And Fannie and Freddie, fast forward into the more modern era, said, we're misinterpreting what Vic meant by these handwritten notes. We only gave him that much space in the form to write something.
Right.
So now he's got to write a long addenda about things. So you're flipping pages back and forth and all that kind of stuff. Let's just come up with a method by which we can read all this by the computer. And we'll go ahead and give Vic some standards by which he uses whatever nomenclature this happens to be, alphanumeric whatevers. And now the computer knows what that is. Now, does that cover everything? No.
Mm.
Doesn't even come close to it. But does it satisfy the lender who's wanting this report to help the lender understand, is the property properly collateralizing the loan?
Mm-hmm.
They say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's true or not, time will tell.
Right. This has been fun. We've done an hour. And I've really enjoyed this. You've been so good and so gracious with your time, because I know you've got to get this appraisal done by tomorrow at 5. So I appreciate the hour of your time. If people got more questions, and I'm sure they will, because this is going to go to a podcast and people are going to be listening to this over and over again, and people are going to have questions, and they're going to go, Vic, if they wanted to reach out to you, or if they had questions, where could they get a hold of you, or where should they go?
Two things.
Mm.
I have 2 different websites.
Okay.
My appraisal website is appraiser.com.
Mm-hmm.
My telephone number is 919-308-7000.
Okay.
Those are the 2 easiest ways to get in touch with me. The appraiser.com is spelled, so I want to make sure this is clear. It's spelled APPRAIZR.com.
Clever.
I wish I could have gotten ahead of
because I was about to say to you, if you owned appraiser.com all spelled out with the way we know how to spell it, I would go, we got to talk, because you're a genius.
Well, I just couldn't. Somebody got ahead of me.
So APPRAIZR.
Like appraise,
APPRAIZR.com. Yeah.
That's where all my appraisal stuff is.
And then it's 919-308-7000.
Yeah.
Is the other way.
My other website is my teaching website,
which is
startschoolnc.com.
startschoolnc.com. So here's the thing. I'm going to pitch this. If you're okay with that, I'm going to pitch this a little bit. So listen, let's say you've said, God, I want to get my real estate license and I need to go to a pre-licensing school. Where should I go? They should go to
startschoolnc.com.
startschoolnc.com.
Yep.
And by the way, you heard how knowledgeable he is. I mean, he's incredibly knowledgeable. And I think I've actually taken an update course with you years ago, talking about appraisals. This is years ago, because I've had my license since 97. Mm-hmm. So it's been a long time, but I do remember taking a course from you years and years ago. Great instructor, by the way. You can learn a lot. Thank you for doing this, Vic. I really appreciate you and your time, and thank your wife for me. She's probably listening or watching probably right now as we're talking.
She probably is.
She probably is. Thank you for allowing him to come out, because I know that I know you've got him scheduled. Well, a lot of fun. Great time. Thank you so much. Stay with me, folks. This is a show. Oh, appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Folks, it's a show. You had a lot of choices. You chose us. Thank you. We're always grateful for that. Also, give us a thumbs up on YouTube if you're watching us there. Wherever you're listening to us via podcast, do us a favor. Would you give us a 5-star review and just review us? And it always helps us out. If you need to get in contact with me, it's really simple for real estate right now. Just contact me at j@lindacraft.com. If you have a guest or some information or a topic that you'd like us to cover, we'd love to do that for you. So please feel free to do that. As I say to you all over the world, we appreciate you. We're grateful for you. And ciao, everybody. And we are